Hello. Running an economy isn't easy, nor is saving a political party. This morning, the woman from number 11, the Chancellor, is here alongside the Conservative leader. The economy seems stuck, the books look a mess, so what is Rachel Reeves going to do about that? And Kemi Badenoch says the Conservatives got things wrong, but miles behind. How can they start getting things right? You are quite the double act. Welcome back to you both. For reasons that will become clear, I wonder what your favourite Beatles song is, Rachel Reeves.
I'm more of a Beyonce person myself, Laura, but Hey Jude, I enjoy that song.
And what about you? Are you a Beatles fan?
Yellow Submarine.
Yellow Submarine? Well, I'm sure there'll be very popular choices with the audience. And I'm asking because I've been talking to a proper legend, Sir Paul McCartney, one of the Beatles, who fears that tech firms might rip off artists unless ministers do more to protect their work.
We're the people. You're the government. You're supposed to protect us. That's your job. So protect it.
Morning, morning. Our team at the desk today: Beeban Kidron, film director turned tech safety campaigner; Theo Paphitis, entrepreneur and dragon; and former minister, Conservative chancellor, all sorts of other jobs too, Nadhim Zahawi. Let's start, as we always do, though, with what is making the news this morning. The economy is centre stage for the Sunday Mirror and the Sunday Express, which also features the King in a kilt for Burns Night. The Sunday Telegraph says Rachel Reeves is going to war with Labour's blockers, and The Observer has a poll suggesting voters want the Prime Minister to have closer ties to Europe. The Sunday Times, though, splashes on the awful failings of how the authorities didn't spot the Southport killer. And the BBC has talked to Donald Trump on board Air Force One, who has praised Sir Keir Starmer.
He's done a very good job thus far. He's very new in the job, but he's represented his country in terms of his philosophy. I may not agree with his philosophy, but I have a very good relationship with him.
Well, you can just about hear the champagne corks popping in Downing Street. They've been a bit worried about that relationship. Theo, firstly to you. You were last with us not long after the budget, and you were worried about the effect of the national insurance increases for business. You said there could be repercussions. Have there been repercussions for you and your business? Have you had to shed staff?
Well, that's the obvious one, which was staff, obviously, because business has to absorb, and it's a big shock, very short period of time. But the overriding thought at the time was, with growth, we can get through that. And growth has to be put before, in my view, anything else at the moment. Mm-hmm. Also, understanding the other competitive stresses on UK business, where, you know, we talk about the Donald, who signed 1,000 trillion executive orders in the first 30 seconds of being president, and launched a few bitcoins as well in the process. Yeah. But they are looking at their industries and making sure that they're competing on a level playing field and not being prejudiced from outside countries and outside businesses.
And you'd like to see a bit more of that here?
Absolutely, and we're seeing that now, the uncompetitiveness of some of our business, because other businesses from overseas are not paying the same social taxes we pay, the same responsibilities, regulatory issues, and we need to nail that, because that leakage is going to feed into our economy and we won't get that growth.
Nadhim, what do you think the government should be doing? Because as Conservatives, you repeatedly said the kind of things that Labour's saying now: we'll get rid of planning rules, we'll speed everything up, we'll get infrastructure going, and it didn't happen.
Well, one of the things I wanted to do, and I tried to convince Rishi to do it, but unfortunately he didn't, is to get rid of the inheritance tax, but pay for it through what Italy was doing, and Maloney's done brilliantly on attracting wealth creators with a new non-dom piece of legislation, which would be 200,000 per adult per year if you want to come and be a wealth creator in the UK, sort of an enterprise residency, which would pay for the IHT, which is about 7 billion, right? It's an unfair tax. We'd get rid of it. It will send such a powerful message to even, you know, family offices around the world. They can hold UK assets much more attractively that way. If we do that, some of that work, I think it will make a huge difference. I think infrastructure, and I have to say, what Rachel, I hope, will be announcing on Wednesday is really good. I used to live over the flight path in Putney Hill, and I was one of the few councillors who wanted the third runway, because, by the way, you waste more time, energy, and, of course, hurt the environment by circling over Heathrow than you do if you get the third runway and land the planes on time.
And we will get to that just briefly, Bevan. On tone, you know, the government took a very gloomy, doomy tone in the autumn, telling us repeatedly how difficult things were. Do you think they've got that wrong? Has that had a bad effect?
No, I absolutely do think they've got that wrong, and I think that they haven't sold this growth agenda to the citizens, nor the mum and pop and the small businesses that are actually the backbone of the country. And I think that this pursuing global companies who do not contribute in the same way, as Theo says, is a problem for the reputation of the government. OK, well, you've all laid down the gauntlet for the Chancellor. So did President Trump, who told the global elite at Davos yesterday that change was coming to the economy, whether they like it or not. And the Chancellor does now seem to be changing her tune a bit. Getting the economy going is back to the top of the list. Meet Reeves in a rush.
I want to lead the most pro-growth, to grow the economy, the most pro-business treasury. Growth is our #1 mission. The #1 mission to grow the economy. Kickstart economic growth, the party of growth, grow our economy that our country has ever seen.
Well, however many times you've said it, Rachel Reeves, and you have said it a lot, the latest month of growth was only 0.1%. So how do you think the last 6 months have gone?
Well, our economy has essentially flatlined for more than a decade now. I don't believe that low growth is our destiny, though. I know that we can do so much better than that. My optimism for Britain has never burned brighter than it does now. And that's why we are going further and faster in removing those things that are blocking investment and blocking businesses from creating the wealth and prosperity in our country.
But business people, like Theo's just said, actually say things that you chose to do, like putting national insurance up, making it more expensive for employers to hire staff, that's shaken business confidence. Consumer confidence tumbled. Sainsbury's just this week cut 3,000 jobs just this week. Business optimism is at a 2-year low. And that's after your decisions over the last 7 months. So I ask you again, do you think the last 6 months have been a success?
When I became Chancellor of the Exchequer, I think that most people would recognise that the inheritance was pretty tough. Public finances were in an utter mess.
But this is about the impact of the decisions you took.
Yes, but those decisions were to put our public finances back on a firm footing. And the worst thing that I could have done in the budget was to have swept those problems under the carpet, pretend they didn't exist, and leave us in a situation where our public finances were precarious. Now, why do I say that would have been a risk? Because we've seen what's happened in the past, in the last few years, when governments have lost control of the public finances and interest rates and inflation go through the roof. That's no good for working families in Britain, but it's no good for businesses either. We've now stabilised the public finances, which means that we can go further and faster on that bedrock of stability to grow our economy.
Well, the debt is absolutely enormous, and
but we can now move on and grow our economy.
Well, borrowing is at its highest level for 4 years. The national debt is absolutely enormous,
and that's the debt that I inherited as Chancellor. Yes, we've got to get a grip of those problems with the public finances, but growth is also essential for that, because an economy that is growing is an economy that can service those debts, which is why economic growth is so important. But most of all, economic growth matters because that means more money in the pockets of ordinary working people in our country.
But if it was all going so well and everything had been perfect so far, why are you shifting your tone? I think viewers will hear that you are shifting your tone. You are talking much more now about optimism, ripping up red tape, those kinds of things. And you're even easing off on your plans to make it harder for wealthy non-doms to do business here. Did you make a mistake in underestimating the number of wealthy people who create jobs and wealth here who would leave the UK because of what you did?
Well, first of all, you just played some clips of me speaking during the general election campaign when I was Shadow Chancellor, in my first speeches in Parliament. And on all those occasions, I said growth is the #1 mission. So that's always been the #1 mission of this government. But the first thing to be able to grow the economy is you've got to return stability to the economy. We did that in the budget, and we are now tackling those things that are stopping investment coming by reforming our economy, ripping up the planning system. Just today, we're announcing more changes changes to get housing built, particularly around commuter railway stations, to help businesses access a skilled workforce, to help more people onto the housing ladder, and to ensure that more people can take up those good jobs paying decent wages.
But I'll ask you again, did you make a mistake, or did you underestimate the number of wealthy people who might pack up from the UK because of the decisions that you make? Because you've changed your mind on the rules you were going to bring in for non-doms.
It's a basic principle for me, Laura, that people who make their home in Britain should pay their taxes here. And under this government, people will. We're getting rid of the non-domicile status in the tax system. What we announced this week is around the temporary repatriation facility, which is enabling people, including those who have been non-doms, to bring money into this country from abroad without paying punitive rates of tax.
So you shifted your position.
That doesn't cost UK taxpayers any money. This is not going to result in any dent in the public finances, but it does make it easier for people to bring money in from overseas in a way that the previous government didn't permit.
But did you get it wrong because you've changed your mind?
We're making some changes to one part of the way in which very wealthy people from abroad are taxed. But it is a principle of this government. And actually, the previous government also made changes around non-dom rules, that if you make Britain your home, you should pay your taxes here. But we want to be an attractive place for some of the wealthiest and most talented people around the world. It's why when we publish our immigration white paper later this year, we're going to be consulting on visas for the highest skilled, particularly in sectors like AI and life sciences, to ensure that Britain is a welcoming place for global talent.
What about a welcoming place for people who've had businesses here for hundreds of years, many of them family farms? Your controversial inheritance tax proposals for farms, we now know, are only penciled in to raise £500 million. Now, of course, that's a huge amount of money for any normal person. In terms of government spending, that is tiny, and you've shaken a whole sector. You've made farmers very unhappy. We had an email from Arabella Solway, a family farmer, who wrote to us last night saying everybody now has to put aside anything they earn to counter the fear of the inheritance tax bill that may hit them at an unknown time. They're not investing in farms, not buying new equipment.
Well, let me answer those questions directly. In the most recent year of tax data, 40% of the benefit of agricultural property relief went to just 7% of estates. 37 estates got more than £100 million worth of tax relief. That is not affordable and it's not fair. Agricultural property relief will still be a more generous system of inheritance tax than anyone else pays. You pay at just half the rate. And unlike everybody else, you'll have 10 years to pay that tax bill interest-free, something
but
again that no one else
was it
can.
worth it for £500 million
well, you know,
to
Laura,
shake a sector? Also, the supermarkets have gone public and said this is an issue, it might have an impact on the food
Laura,
supply.
I had to take decisions to raise taxes
so it was
at
worth
the budget to put our public finances on a firm footing. Those tax changes were the right changes, because otherwise we'd be on this programme talking about what tax changes would we have to bring in the future to stabilise the public finances. I've now drawn a line under the economic and fiscal mismanagement of the previous government. Our sums add up in a way that they didn't with the plans I inherited from the previous government, and we are now cracking on doing the things on regulation, on planning, on AI, on pensions and capital markets reform to make Britain the best place in the world to grow and start a business and to bring in inward investment, creating good jobs, putting more money in people's pockets.
And you are visibly going to start doing a big push, a much more overt push to get things done. But there have been all sorts of projects, public projects, sitting on the shelf, not just for the 7 months since you've been in charge, but also for years. Look, there are some of the ones, viewers around the country might spot things near them. There are all sorts of projects that it's been blatantly obvious that for years need a shove to get on with. Why is it taking you 7 months to realise you have to put your foot down?
Well, we've already called in and signed off a number of planning decisions on onshore wind, on housing developments, on data centres, more decisions in the first 6 months than the previous government took in the last year to unlock investment in a whole range of sectors. If the challenge is to go further and faster, absolutely, that is what we are doing. Just today, we're changing the rules to make it easier to build homes around train train stations. That's something that Andy Burnham has been trying to do in Greater Manchester, but it's too hard to do that today. We want to go further and faster, make sure that people can get on the housing ladder, make sure we're building the infrastructure so we can grow our economy so that people are better off.
There's an interesting point though here, because you and your colleagues sat in that chair all through last year saying we are ready to hit the ground running as soon as we get into power. We're brilliantly prepared. We know exactly what we're going to do. You're now 7 months in, and actually there are an awful lot of things that you're now saying, well, yes, we have to get on, we have to go further and faster. Were you too slow to begin with? Do you admit that?
Well, some of these things require legislation, and we're just about to introduce the Planning and Infrastructure Bill. The consultation on the pension reforms we want to bring in closed last week, so we can bring forward that legislation. But, you know, we want to crack on. We've been in opposition for 14 years. Already, Angela Rayner, Ed Miliband, Heidi Alexander have signed off planning decisions in their areas, planning decisions that have been sitting on the desks of previous ministers. A solar wind farm in Cambridgeshire had been on the desks of ministers since 2021. Ed Miliband signed that off in his first month in office. That will create secure, homegrown and cheap energy. There is no reason why it took 3 years to get that decision across the line. It's now a decision this government has made to have cheap, secure energy, more good jobs in Britain.
And the last time I checked, to go further and faster around the world, you need to get on a plane. So are you going to go further and faster and approve another runway at London's Heathrow this week?
I'm not going to comment on speculation on that. But
Chancellor,
we have already...
It's not speculation. It's our viewers asking the Chancellor, who knows exactly what you're going to do, what you are going to do. It's not speculation. So let me put it this way. Would you correct me if we said here on the BBC News, Rachel Reeves is likely to announce Heathrow expanding this week?
Well, you'll see the plans when we set them out. But already this government has signed off expansion at London City Airport and Stansted Airport. Both of those decisions, again, were decisions that the previous government had stalled. We're getting on and delivering. That will be good for investment and trade in our country, and also good for families wanting to go on cheaper holidays as well. So we're getting on and delivering, whether it's on transport, energy, data or housing.
OK, I think that was a pretty big wink to it. What bit of this do you disagree with? Your colleague Sadiq Khan, the Mayor of London, said some time ago that the decision to allow Heathrow will have a damaging impact on air quality, noise and London's ability to achieve net zero. What bit of that don't you agree with?
Well, a lot has changed in terms of aviation. A sustainable aviation fuel is changing carbon emissions from flying. There's huge investment going on electric planes. And also a third runway will mean that instead of circling London, flights can land at Heathrow. So a lot has changed in aviation, and sustainable aviation and economic growth go hand in hand. We're an open trading economy. We need to bring investment in. But I believe that clean energy, that reducing our carbon emissions are good for economic growth. We can do the two together.
There will be a third runway then. You more or less just said that.
Well, we'll announce our plans in due course, but already we've signed off expansion at Stansted and City Airport. You
mentioned there sustainable air fuel. Now, if you really want to grow the economy, if you really want to invest in new technologies, why are you going to let the Grangemouth refinery in Scotland go to the wall? It's one of the places in the country that could make sustainable air fuel. Nowhere in the UK makes it right now. So why not step in to help there? We have given money to that local authority, and we are working with the Scottish Government with a growth plan for Grangemouth. It's a very difficult situation that we find ourselves in, but we're working closely with the Scottish Government to support people in that area. But it's due to close, and then at a later date there'd be fewer and different jobs as it makes a transition to become a different kind of plant, a fuel import depot. Those are skilled jobs in an industry where you could build a new one with sustainable aviation fuel. If you want the economy to grow and to create good jobs, isn't that exactly what you should be doing? But we need to partner with business to create those good jobs paying decent wages. It's why we've invested, for example, alongside with BP and Equinor in Teesside and Merseyside in carbon capture and storage to support some of our energy intensive industries like ceramics and cement and glass making, to preserve those jobs, to create new jobs in Britain. There are big opportunities as we deal
decarbonise the economy, to bring good jobs, given our industrial heritage, whether that's in Scotland and the north of England. And the good thing about these jobs is these are jobs in our former industrial heartlands and in our coastal communities. And we want to work, and we are working with businesses to unlock those jobs and growth opportunities.
Well, those are exactly the kind of jobs that might go in Grangemouth. But I just wonder how much of this new tone, optimism that you're really trying to emphasise today is down to the new man in the White House who's going to protect industry, get rid of rules, cut taxes. Are you taking lessons from Donald Trump?
Well, we want to shout loudly with business about everything our country has to offer. It's what I was doing in Davos last week. It's what I was doing when I went with a business delegation to unlock opportunities for financial services firms trading in China. We want investment to come to Britain. We have got some of the best businesses in the world, some of the most inspiring entrepreneurs, a talented workforce, some of the best universities in the world. And in sectors like life sciences, in AI and clean energy, we are global leaders.
So you're trying to make
we want
the
to
economy
shout
great
about that
again
as a government and work with businesses to unlock that opportunity. And there's huge opportunities in the United States as well.
But do you want to make the economy great again? I mean, are there lessons you think you can learn from the way that Donald Trump is setting about his new administration?
Well, no one is going to shout about all of the amazing things about a country, apart from the government and the businesses in a country. I'm going to do that for Britain. We have got unique strengths. We've got huge opportunities, and I'm determined to go further and faster on delivering those for Britain.
Here's one of the dilemmas where you want to encourage a new industry but also protect an existing one. We're going to hear a bit later from Paul McCartney, because ministers are mulling whether to allow supercomputers, AI, as it gets incredibly sophisticated, to skim content from artists like him on the internet without paying copyright. There are lots of very serious concerns about this in the creative industries. Not just Paul McCartney, but Sir Elton John has come out against this idea in one of the newspapers this morning. Would you be willing to listen to those concerns, to have those artists into number 11 and sit down and try to work out what to do?
The government are looking at copyright rules. We've got to get the balance right. We have got an amazing creative industry sector in the UK, one of the fastest growing sectors in the economy. And we want to support artists to make sure that they are properly rewarded for the content that they create. But I don't think that is incompatible with attracting AI companies to invest in data centres and compute facility here in the UK. And unless we get that investment, we're going to miss out on big opportunities, not just for big firms, but also to make sure that smaller businesses can use new technologies to improve their productivity and improve their wages in their sectors.
But would you, as the Chancellor in charge of the economy, have them into number 11 to listen to their concerns? Because at the moment, there is very significant concern right across the creative industries that these proposals, as they stand, could do lasting damage.
I've met with Elton John. I'm very happy always to meet with great British entrepreneurs and creatives to talk about how our economy can work better for them. But I don't think we should see these things as either or. We've got to support our creative industry. It's a fast-growing growth sector in the UK. It's part of our modern industrial strategy. But there are huge opportunities in the jobs and the industries of AI. It's why just a couple of weeks ago, the Prime Minister launched our AI action plan to ensure that we can attract those frontier businesses to the UK, but also ensure that smaller businesses can boost their productivity
it's
too.
It's an interesting dilemma, and unlikely to be the last for the government as you balance the risks and the opportunity. I want to just finally to talk a bit about what happened in Southport. Now, obviously, it was incredibly distressing, sensitive case. Everybody has been shocked by the details this week and, of course, appalled by the original events. But one of the issues here that the government itself is raising today, your colleagues, the Home Secretary and the Tech Secretary, have written to the online platforms saying, take down some of the harmful material that the killer had watched. If the companies don't do that, what will you as a government do?
Well, first of all, what happened in Southport and the grief that the families that have lost their beautiful children, and also those children who did not lose their lives but will forever remember those scenes that they saw unfold. My heart goes out to all of them, and we've got to learn lessons, which is why there's going to be a public inquiry to make sure we understand what went wrong and why this evil man was not caught and dealt with sooner. On the issue around content online, it's totally unacceptable the fact that the killer, before he went on to commit those horrific crimes, was able to access really easily on some of the online platforms such hateful material. And those companies have got a moral responsibility to take that content down and make it harder for people to access it. Already, in some countries around the world, including Australia, their companies have taken it down. So they can do that. We are asking them to do that. We've also introduced the online safety bill. Those rules will come in March, but there's nothing stopping the companies taking down that material now. They've got a moral responsibility to do so. But the Online Safety Act has provisions in it to ensure that these things happen. But let's not wait until then. We don't need legislation to stop these from happening. These companies can, and they should, take that material down now.
OK. Chancellor Rachel Reeves, it's always great to have you with us in the studio. Thank you very much indeed for your time this morning. Now then, remember, as ever, we want to know what you think. What did you think of what Rachel Reeves had to say? You can send an email in, kuenssberg@bbc.co.uk, or if you are social media inclined, you can use the hashtag BBC Laura Kay, and our WhatsApp number is there for you on the screen. Theo, what did you make of the Chancellor this morning? Do you believe that she's now got growth actually in her sights?
Well, I think she's absolutely right. Without growth, we will not see any benefits in business and the things that we're all expecting. Our whole society has been underinvested for a long time now. So getting our finances up to date and stable and having a stable background for business is brilliant. But we now need to take those actions that create that growth. And that does need legislation and quick legislation.
And I suppose the thing is, are you convinced now that she really has the bit between her teeth and actually can get on with it? Because I think everyone watching this morning is probably going to think, I haven't just heard this from the Chancellor, I've heard it from plenty of politicians over the years.
Well, the proof of the pudding, as we discussed earlier, the proof of the pudding is in the eating. And you're right, we've heard it from politicians. We had a little chit-chat in the green room beforehand.
Gossiping when I wasn't there.
We
That's
were,
terrible.
and I was saying, this is brilliant, I love what you're saying, but you could have done all that when you had power, and you didn't. We won't go there now, but it's important now that we see action. And I know personally I've made representations to the Chancellor regarding the unfair advantages non-UK companies get in accessing our internal economic market.
Biban, what did you make of it?
Well, everybody has to be sympathetic with the inheritance, and I do agree with her on that. But I'm worried about the numbers. I mean, she didn't really answer your questions about non-dom, about farmers, about some of those things. And if I pick up on the area that I know most about, which is the AI piece, at the centre of the AI opportunities strategy is this incredibly made-up number of 400 billion by 2030. And if you follow the footnote, it comes from a tech lobbying group paid for by Google, and they asked the computer. Now, if you ask the IMF and money, figures that come out of proper sources, that number is the global uplift.
So hang on, you're saying that when the Prime Minister stands up and says there's all this opportunity from artificial intelligence, let's bring these industries here, it could make us £400 billion, you're telling us that that is a number about the whole world that actually has come from ChatGPT?
That, I can't say ChatGPT, but definitely from generative AI. And I think this is the problem, is we have to ask, where is this benefit and where is the cost?
And Nadeem, however, Heathrow, I mean, I think she really didn't want to confirm it today, but she was talking about the benefits a third runway would bring. And by the way, we're expanding the others.
Absolutely.
And you've sat in that seat. That means a yes, doesn't it?
That is good news. Because I think, as she echoed what I said earlier about, instead of flights circling over Heathrow over London for 45 minutes, they can land on a third runway. That's great. Housing is good. But, and here's the real rub, what do we learn from America versus Europe, right? Europe has stagnated, America has grown. Why? Flexible labour market, right? I bought a business in Palo Alto 20 years ago for YouGov, and we became a unicorn because actually having a flexible labour market where you can right-size a business, Theo will tell you, is a nightmare in the UK. Worse in Europe, but we can learn from that. So legislation around employment has to be thought through very carefully before it begins to damage growth. And that's what we all want, because growth delivers better wages, ultimately. 2, energy. Cheap energy, ultimately, is a good thing. Why? Because actually innovation, whether it's sustainable fuels or solar, right, is a good thing. But it's happening, and it's happening rapidly. That's good. But let's not then cut our nose off to spite our face and not use the energy resource we have in the North Sea. Why are they doing that? Why is Ed Miliband selling really a pup to the nation? The idea that you can decarbonise the economy by 2030 and it costs you nothing. It won't. It will cost a fortune.
Well, of course, what Labour would say is
to industry. By the way, the people who build the houses, right? Wouldn't it be better if all the components for those houses were made in the UK? They can't be made in the UK if you have high energy costs.
How much do you think is the influence of Donald Trump is causing this change of tone in government theory?
Oh, there's no question it is. But the other thing, we talk about decarbonisation. Listen, you can't just decarbonise the UK on its own.
Correct.
You've got to decarbonise the world. If we go at a different pace, at the cost of our economy to other countries, while they grow their economy, that'd be disaster.
But you do think that Trump is part of the reason why this government is now shifting its tone and is more like, let's lift our eyes to the skies and be excited about the future, Theo?
But I think actions that are being taken elsewhere definitely have an effect on our economy. So we cannot ignore what's happening elsewhere in the world.
Now, we're about to hear from Sir Paul McCartney. Beeban, this is your specialist area, and we have talked a lot about artificial intelligence in the last year or so in the programme, because it's going to be, it already is, such a huge part of our lives, whether we know it or not. Can you explain the dilemma that he is actually concerned about in the simplest terms you can, because we're not all specialists like you?
So the government's introduced a proposal that will allow AI companies to scrape, which is take copyright without payment or permission from creative artists. And I think it's really important to know 2 things. First of all, creative artists aren't just Paul McCartney. They're musicians, they're journalists, they're authors, they're historians. You know, it's right across the piece. And it's a hugely important industry that creates 126 billion for the UK economy, 2.4 million people in it. And the government are suggesting that they give that money away for free or they opt out. Opt out is really difficult. Opt out is technically currently impossible. And opt out puts the weight on the creator to go and find the AI companies that have taken their work. And so all we're saying is, and all the industry is saying right across the piece is, we want to make the copyright laws fit for purpose for the AI age. And we want to know when, where and how AI takes it and make sure they take it on license. Because the key point is, artists they're not against AI. They want to work with. They don't want to be annihilated.
So I'll tell you what's really interesting.
So briefly, Nadeem.
Right. Original information, whether it's data or creative industries, is going to be the new gold, right? These tech titans in other jurisdictions around the world, right? Lo and behold, they can play by the rules, right? They come to the UK or other areas and they go, oh no, we can't do this because the technology doesn't allow for it. That's not true. We build the guardrails where we protect one of our most valuable industries, whether IP for musicians or in the media, you know, whether it's journalism or creative industries, and they'll play by the rules and they'll pay the fair share.
So
that's a good thing.
So should your party, the Conservatives, then back the idea of making it, as Beeban wants, an opt-in to protect artists when it comes to a vote in the Lords this week?
I think it's much better. But it actually produces a win-win, because original information is the one thing that, you know, large language models can't do. They can look at the past. They can't create new original material.
Okay, and it keeps the money in the UK instead of siphoning it all off to Silicon Valley. Okay. That's a key point.
OK, well, let's hear from the man himself. As we've been talking about, the opportunities and the risks of artificial intelligence is a really tricky and growing dilemma for the government. How do you deal with the opportunity and also the risks from these cleverer and cleverer computers? But this is a really practical example. Just to recap, ministers are suggesting tech companies can hoover up music or any kind of art from the internet to develop their own AI models without having to pay for copyright. In other words, for free. And for thousands of people in the UK, making art isn't just a passion, it's a job. Not least for Beatles legend Sir Paul McCartney. And he reckons it's a threat they just shouldn't have to bear. Paul, as computers become more and more sophisticated and suck in more and more content that humans have created, the government's got a big decision to take about whether they protect the copyright of musicians, actors, artists. What are you worried about?
Just that. Just worried about the copyrights not being protected. Because if it gets a bit like the Wild West, then the people who created these copyrights don't benefit. And I think that takes away a lot of incentive, you know, because when we were kids in Liverpool, we found a job that we loved, but it also paid the bills. So it allowed us to be creative, more and more creative, go out in the world and bring joy to people. And so it allowed us to do that. I think if you take that away and they take the incentive away by not protecting the copyrights, I think it'd be a shame. And I think you'd see a loss of creativity, which is a great pity, you know, because that's what brings so much joy to the world.
The Beatles was about music, but also about being able to put food on the table and pay the bills as a young man. What do you think the risk is for the next generation of musicians coming through?
So, for instance, you get young guys, girls, coming up and they write a beautiful song and they don't own it and they don't have anything to do with it, and anyone who wants can just rip it off. I mean, the truth is the money's going somewhere. You know, when it gets on the streaming platforms, somebody's getting it, and it should be the person who created it. It shouldn't just be some tech giant somewhere. Somebody's getting paid. So why shouldn't it be the guy who sat down and wrote yesterday? It should be something to do with him.
And if you hadn't been paid, then maybe the world wouldn't have ever heard Yesterday or Let It Be or Hey Jude.
You know, that is really true, because you like to think of art as the muse. You know, it's just, the muse comes to me. It's not like that. You know, we started off and we had options to kind of go in a factory or go to get a job. You know, occasionally you did those kind of jobs. But the minute you found a job you loved, which for us was music, it really made a great big difference, you know, and it allowed us to do stuff that our working class friends had never been able to do. So I think it was a great thing. Love me do, whoa, love me do.
And actually, you used a kind of machine learning technology to help produce the song that you put out last year to, you know, recreate John Lennon's vocal performance from something from 1970. So what would you say to someone who say, well, look, you're being a Luddite, you're just, you know, sticking your heels in because you don't like the idea of progress?
Yeah, I get that, you know, and I think AI is great. And it can do lots of great things. As you say, you know, we took an old cassette of John's and cleaned his voice up, so it sounded like it's just been recorded yesterday.
I know it's true. It's all because of you. And if I make it through, it's all
So it has its uses, but my worry is in this rip-off area. You know, that was John's thing. He was in the Beatles. His widow gave us the tape. So there was no question of sort of copyright. Mm-hmm. But when you if you take that and then rip it off. See, for instance, I think I'm on the internet singing God Only Knows by the Beach Boys, but I never sang it. But AI made me sing it. So somebody's getting some sort of payoff there, and it's not me. I'm not interested. But I was talking to someone and I said, you know, it didn't sound like me, not quite, but to casual observers, it's me singing, God only knows. But I said to this person, I said, yeah, but you know, give it 5 years and it's going to sound exactly like me. And the guy said, 1. Give it 1 year. And it's true, it's going so fast that, you know, they're going to be able to put my voice on anything, anybody's voice on anything. So I think you just have to worry about the rip-off. AI is a great thing, but it shouldn't rip creative people off. There's no sense in that. Why would a government want to do that? I don't get it.
So what would your message then be? As it happens, we've got the Chancellor with us on Sunday morning who's, you know, got a thing or two to decide in the government. What would your message be to our politicians then who are trying to make the decision at the moment about how to and whether to protect the copyright of artists like you?
We're the people. You're the government. You're supposed to protect us. That's your job. So, you know, if you're putting through a bill, make sure you protect the creative thinkers, the creative artists, or you're not going to have them.
As simple as that.
If there's such a thing as a government, it's their responsibility, I would think, to protect the young people, to try and enhance that whole thing so that it works, so that these people have got jobs and can enhance the world with their wonderful art. So protect it.
Well, you certainly enhanced the world in many ways for hundreds of millions of people, and it's been an absolute joy to talk to you for this weekend's programme.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Laura.
Paul.
Thank you. I'm a fan of yours too.
I didn't know they were going to leave that bit in. Anyway, let's move on. Kemi Badenoch was with us the day after she became the Conservative leader. She told us then that the party had lost the public trust and would need to be honest about where they got things wrong. Well, 3 months on, she's made her first big speech of the year, but the public doesn't seem to be exactly rushing back to the Conservatives. In fact, recent polls suggest more of the public are now backing Nigel Farage's Reform UK than the Tories. But pleased to say she's here with us for the first time this year. Do you think it's been a successful first 3 months for you in the job?
I think it's been a good first 3 months. I think success is going to take some time. We made a lot of mistakes, as I said, the last time I was here on the show, and we need to start earning that trust back. And that's the journey that the party is going on, rebuilding trust. And that means doing the job that they've given us to do, being a credible and effective opposition, which I think is going well. Even the things that we've done this year, forcing the government on a U-turn on their education bill, making sure that they take the rape gangs issue seriously. They haven't done a national inquiry like I asked, but they have actually moved when they weren't going to do anything before. So there's a lot more to come.
So you think you are starting to get some traction this year, but you made that big speech. And what was the main thing that you wanted the public to take away from that? Because you outlined some of the mistakes. You said on net zero, on Brexit, you weren't prepared enough, and on immigration, you made a promise to cut it and then didn't. But what was the central message you wanted people to take if they didn't see you make the speech?
That the Conservative Party is under new leadership and we're going to be doing things differently. The fundamental problem that we have across politics over the last few decades is the politicians tell people what they want to hear. So you're hearing announcements, not plans. I saw Rachel Reeves sitting here, a few minutes ago, doing the exact same thing, saying what they'd like to do. And when you say what people want to hear without working out how you're going to deliver it, then you run into trouble after you win. It's not just about winning. It's about doing the right thing and being able to deliver. And that requires a lot of hard truths, which we have not been discussing as a country for years.
But it's a very damning indictment of your own party's time in office and the governments that you were also part of, latterly. It's not just that you got some things wrong, but it's also you weren't straight with the country.
I think that there is more that we could have said, but I was not running the party then. I am now. And people saw my way of doing things. There were many arguments which we had, which I didn't win. People saw that, but I was always very loyal, certainly in public. You have to take collective responsibility. But now I can say the areas where I did disagree. I can talk about some of the things that I did. And I'm somebody who doesn't run away from difficult issues, even when there's personal pain involved. And that's one thing that I see a lot of politicians not want to deal with difficult things because it's too hard. They get attacked a lot, they get vilified. We're moving things along. And I do acknowledge that we made mistakes, but new leadership is going to require us doing some things that people may also not like. But actually, if we're going to earn the public's trust, then they need to see that what we're doing is real.
Let's talk then about a very difficult issue. It's been very difficult for people this week to absorb the full horror of what happened in Southport and to hear more about the heinous crimes that were committed. Now, after the conviction of Rudakabana, who took the lives of those young children, you said it was absurd the country wasn't debating integration more. What did you mean by that?
Well, that incident in Southport affected me really deeply. I have two girls, you know, they love Taylor Swift, and when it happened, I could just imagine it being them. And so it's really hard for me to hear the story without thinking about the impact on victims and looking at how we can make sure that this doesn't happen again. There are a lot of people like that, and there's still information coming up, but there are a lot of people like Rudakabana who are, despite being here from childhood or born here, they're not integrating into the rest of society. They hate their country, and they're being told that everything about the UK is terrible. He had materials about, white genocide and so on. If you are being inculcated in hate, you are not integrating well. And there's so much that we can do across the board, not just on religious extremism, but also just extremism across the board.
But when people use the word integration in conversations like this, that's normally taken to mean people from different racial or different religious backgrounds. As you said, the killer was born in this country. His father's an African Christian. His mother's involved in the church. There are photographs of him in the newspaper this morning at the drama club that he used to go to. What's your evidence in this case that his crimes were anything to do with a lack of integration?
That, I believe, is certainly one of the elements. There will be many elements, but my evidence is my personal experience. I'm saying this as someone from a similar African Christian background, born in this country, that the effort we make to make people feel a part of the whole is very limited, and it shouldn't just be government, it should just be the whole of society. We allow many groups, and I've seen it even in my own personal circles, many groups just to develop their own insular, sort of segregated isolationist ways.
But I'll ask you again, because it's a very sensitive issue and it's important to be really clear. What is your evidence that that was part of the factors in this case? His family were involved in the local community. They were involved in their local church. What's your evidence that a lack of integration was part of the reason that he went on to commit these absolutely heinous crimes?
But Laura, this is part of the problem. I have seen what has come out of the court case. I have made an observation. I think that these are things that need to be looked at. But every single time a politician wants to talk about these issues, there's often a pushback. Well, what's the evidence? Well, we're not really sure. Should we use this sort of language? And the minute we start going down that track, I think we start to lose our way. I have seen a lot of evidence from things like the Commission on Race and Ethnic Disparities, from a lot of the work that I did as a minister, that more needs to be done. And when I see these cases, and it's not just Southport, the rape gangs scandal is another one. There are incidents happening across the country that are forming a picture of things going wrong. And I want us to talk about it. But if every time we start having these conversations, people are shut down, well, we haven't seen the evidence, it's very difficult to get this kind of evidence. We do need personal experience. We do need anecdotes. Those are the things that really help us shift the dial. And we need a whole society approach on integration. And I'm not scared to tell those hard truths. I believe that we need to be honest.
I'm not suggesting for a second that we shouldn't talk about integration, but what I'm asking you to be specific about is, in this appalling case, what is the evidence that his heinous crimes were related in any way to a lack of integration in his community?
Well, this goes well beyond the community. This isn't just about people making friends in the community. It is about the sense of understanding of who they are, what they are doing in a country, why they are there, and why they should want the success of the people around them, the success of the country, not just feeling like they are so set apart. We saw evidence from the court case about the materials that he was reading, some of it religious extremism, some of it racial and ethnic hatred. That's enough for us to go on. We don't need to do, so much research on this for us to even just have a conversation about integration. And that's what I'm talking about. It's something that I'd wanted to do in government. I even had a report where we wanted to look at the success of migrants coming in, multiple generations. We ran out of time. That's work that I think we need to make a priority. Let's do that. And that's something that the government will not do. Keir Starmer is scared of these topics. He wants to run away from them. And I think that he needs to not be a lawyer about these issues and lead.
You'd raise the issue of the law. The Crown Prosecution Service, in this case, advised the government not to release certain information after the incident took place. Would you, if you were in charge, would you have overruled the CPS and said actually that information, as much as possible, should be out there to provide clarity for everybody?
I think it is really important that we make sure that the public has reassurance that the government is on top of things and knows what they're doing. As a minister, and the Prime Minister in particular, he will receive lots of advice from all sorts of places, but he has to make that ultimate decision. And this is why I think that whatever inquiry we have now needs to look at not just the incident itself, but the government's response to it and what we can do.
CPS in this case?
I don't know exactly the advice the CPS gave, but I would have gone with whatever pathway would have provided the best reassurance to the public without prejudicing the trial. It's important that we don't run into contempt of court issues. That's why I have not raised the issue, which was sub judice in Parliament. We have a constitutional arrangements in this country, but there are precedents for that information being given out. There are precedents. So why was it different in this case? Because what we saw, the level of unrest we saw after that, really scared me. I know what it's like to be an ethnic minority in this country. I know what it's like to be a parent of young children, to want safety. We need to be able to have conversations where people know what the truth is and we don't create a void for misinformation.
And misinformation, of course, is something that's circulated in that instance and many others on social media. You're obviously concerned about young people's use of tech because the Conservatives are proposing to ban smartphones in schools. Why?
I am someone who strongly believes that young people should not be using smartphones, ideally up until the age of 16. I have a child who's nearly 12. She's just started secondary school. She's not been given a smartphone. She has a brick phone. And the reason why is because it is very difficult to control the sorts of information that they are getting. I am a very tech-savvy person. I know how the internet works. Even I find it a struggle to lock down information that my children should not be accessing. And speaking to head teachers, I remember talking to the head teacher of Michaela about this, that the children who have smartphones do worse, have lower concentration than the ones who don't. We need to give our children the very best start in life. We didn't have these things when we were young, Laura. And even as adults, we find it addictive. If adults are addicted to this, then what chance do children have?
People will be interested to hear you start to set out more of what you believe on that issue and others. But many in your own party and also the polls suggest that you've struggled to get momentum since the time you've been in charge. And you're regularly behind in the polls. Reform UK, Nigel Farage's party, he's having a good time at your expense. And if we show the poll of polls, so it's the average of all the latest ones, you are behind Reform. Why do you think he's ahead of you?
Because we have just been kicked out. The public certainly were very angry with the Conservative Party in July. What is surprising is that Labour is doing so badly.
Well, my question is about
yes,
you,
I know.
You're the big...
But it isn't 6 months after you've just been kicked out. This was our most historic defeat. We've never had a defeat as bad as this. The idea that 6 months later the public would be rushing back to us is for the birds. What's happening is that they've just kicked out one party. The party that they voted for is letting them down. So the protest vote gets the support. And what we're seeing is people protesting at everything. They are angry and they have every right to be. But what I need to do is show that the Conservative Party is under new leadership and also hold the government to account because they are making a lot of mistakes. I heard Rachel sit here and say certain things that are simply not true. She's not bringing any stability to the economic finances, saying she'd signed off airports which were already in train. She actually stopped airport development in her constituency. Stansted Airport is in mine, and I never did that. We need to show the difference between us and Labour.
And just lastly, one of the tangles you've had since you've been in charge is with Nigel Farage, where you accused the Reform Party of exaggerating their membership numbers. How many members does the Conservative Party have now?
We do not release our membership numbers. I know what they are.
Well, why not? Because you were happy to have a go at Nigel Farage saying that he had artificially inflated his, and then Reform UK took people in to go and look at how many members they have. Wouldn't it make people feel reassured if you were willing to be transparent about your own membership?
It's really important that we focus on the things that matter. I made a comment on Boxing Day. It does, but it doesn't matter to people out there. I've been travelling around the country. I was in Devon on Friday. I've been in the Midlands People are crying out for help. They tell me that they are struggling. They're not interested in the Westminster bubble gossip of who has more members. I made a comment on Boxing Day, and I went back to my Christmas, and I actually found it quite funny, the number of people who were spending time on that. Most people were spending time with their families. That's what was important to me. Right now, I need to make sure that people can see that there is new leadership, that we're holding the government to account on all those issues that I mentioned on education, whether it's Southport or gangs, and definitely on the economy. This is the big thing. We are very worried about where we're going as a country.
And we'll hear lots more about the economy in the coming days. But Kemi Badenoch, thanks so much for coming in for the first time this year. It's great to have you with us. We look forward to having you back soon. Right then, let's have a final word with our panel at the desk about what we've been discussing this morning. Nadeem, I've got to come to you first. Former Cabinet Minister, and I think you backed Robert Jenrick for the leadership, but you have been listening, I'm sure, attentively to what Kemi Badenoch had to say. How do you assess her this morning and how she's getting on in general?
I think the response to the Pakistani rape gangs was actually pure Kemi, in the sense that thoughtful, evidence-based, and pushed hard the government. I think the response to Southport has been thoughtful about giving the judges the ability to deliver a whole life sentence, so this murderer is never ever released and dies in prison. I think actually what she said about perceived cultural sensitivities trumping the collective welfare of the nation, is she's right. I.e., for far too long, I think some of the mistakes that police forces have made, councils, especially on the Pakistani rape gangs, is because we thought we don't want to upset that particular community because culturally maybe they're a bit different than us. No, if you come and make the UK your home, as my parents did, then you abide by the rules of this country. Countries that have done it well, the UAE, 200 different nationalities, living
you're raising an eyebrow,
side by side.
And we're short of time, but Biban is raising an eyebrow, so let's hear
she's
from
done
Biban.
well on those things. The mistake, I think, is going on to the membership with Farage. That was a mistake.
All right, Biban.
Okay, so first of all, I've been in child protection for over a decade, and there's two people who never showed up to help. One of them's Kemi Badenoch, the other one's Elon Musk, and that trolling of the government around that issue is not victim-led, is not what victim wanted. I think the other thing is that whole conversation that is about, integration, and it took a long time, and it took you to raise the issue of social media. That government, the previous government, blocked us.
Kemi, during the leadership, to be fair to Kemi, during the leadership, she actually raised this issue. So it's not fair to say she's never been.
The previous government.
I need to give Theo a final word. I don't disagree with you.
Hang on,
but that's not fair.
Hang on. The previous government blocked a duty of care in the Online Safety Act. And this government have not come through on the promises they made in opposition.
Final word to you. And the verbosity of your fellow colleagues at the desk has left you with hardly any time, I'm afraid.
First words are legislation changes for technology, desperate, big tech companies taking huge, fabulous wealth out of our economy and not having social responsibility for their actions and not paying for it. We need to legislate now.
Well, there's something very interesting about 2025 is almost any subject we talk about, within a couple of minutes, we almost end up getting to technology. So really, really interesting. I wish we'd have longer with you three because it's been a really fascinating chat with you this morning. Thank you for getting in touch because we always love hearing your thoughts. Annie Mollett has emailed in to say she thinks Rachel Reeves has been too negative and the country's had enough of her blaming past governments. But Tim Griffiths thinks Labour's policies have not had time to take effect. So lacklustre growth figures are surprising. Bernadette wrote in about environmental concerns of building a third runway, saying it would be incompatible with achieving net zero and there's no such thing as sustainable air travel. Well, that's a conversation that might be quite feisty this week in the next few days. Thank you to all my guests and most of all, of course, to you for spending your Sunday morning with us when the Chancellor signalled with a very heavy hint that a third runway at Heathrow will be announced later this week. You'll have to wait till Wednesday to hear exactly what she says, though. Me and Paddy McConnell will talk about that more on today's newscast on BBC Sounds, and you can watch our interview with Beatles legend Sir Paul McCartney again on iPlayer if you like. And I will look forward very much to seeing you next week, same time, same place.